Welcome back to AM Northwest. Say Nothing is the best-selling true story of the bitter conflict in the 1970s Northern Ireland, and it's now a gripping 9-part series on Hulu.
My mother and father were both proud members of the Irish Republican Army.
Have I told you girls how to make explosives?
It was quite a happy childhood. We were Catholic. It was a segregated society. Everything went to the Protestants. We thought joining the IRA was the noblest thing a person could do.
And when we leave for school?
You're not going to school.
Had that mean the whole time? Soldiers didn't even think to look. You might be missing your chance to win this war.
We wanted to be doing what the boys were doing.
What were the boys doing?
Fundraising.
And we welcome to AM Northwest the author of the best-selling and award-winning novel Say Nothing, Patrick Radden Keefe. Good morning, Patrick. I just watched the first episode last night, and I cannot tell you how incredibly good it is, how powerful it is. It's making me think. I can't get it off my mind. Talk to me about how you were inspired to write this novel in the first place.
So I had not known much about the Troubles myself growing up. In 2013, this woman, Dolores Price, died. And I just happened to randomly read her obituary in the newspaper. And she had been the first woman to join the IRA in the early 1970s. She joined with her little sister, Marion, and they became the first women to actually be like frontline soldiers in the IRA. They lived these very dramatic lives. They went off to London and bombed London. They actually bombed the Old Bailey. They were thrown into prison at Brixton Prison. They went on hunger strike. Dolores came out and she married a movie star. And later in life, she sort of looked back on those early years of radical violence with some misgivings, wondering, what was I doing there? And I'm always looking for stories, I'm not really interested in history lessons. I'm looking for stories that are very closely based on fascinating, larger-than-life characters. And she just kind of pulled me in. And so initially there was the book, and now there's this series largely focused on her experience.
Well, they do pull me in. She pulls me in, and her sister, that women would do something like this, get involved in this way, but they wanted to do what the boys were doing.
Yeah, it's this kind of crazy thing where they identified, this is the early 70s, as feminists. But for them, what feminism meant was, they said, well, I want to be carrying a gun. There's no reason why I shouldn't be out there planting bombs if the guys are. And so there's a kind of topsy-turvy way in which the politics of this play out.
And it starts out with the disappearance of a mother from Belfast, mother of 10 children, who disappears.
That's right. So there was a different woman whose name was Jean McConville, who was a mother of 10, and she was a widow. So she was a widow with 10 kids. She lived in a big public housing project in a poor part of Belfast, West Belfast. And in 1972, in the wintertime, an armed group of people came to the door. They were masked, and they said, we just want to talk to your mother. We'll bring her back in a few hours. And they pulled her away with her kids clinging to her legs. And they never brought her back. She disappeared. It was one of the great mysteries of the Troubles, was what happened to Jean McConville. And the way this whole project started for me was that I learned that there was a connection between Dolores Price, that woman in the IRA, and the disappearance of Jean McConville. And so that's really the kind of seed for this whole thing, is a story of these two very different women, one of them a victim, one of them a perpetrator, and this act of violence that connects them.
Well, first you write this incredible novel, and then it goes to TV, which is has got to be a lot of work. Whoever you chose, the people you chose, did a phenomenal job. I mean, the photography is incredible, the acting is amazing. So talk to me about that process, who you picked and why.
It's funny, I think I had an unusual experience here in the sense that the producers who came to me, Brad Simpson and Nina Jacobson, they had made a show that I really loved called The People vs. O.J. Simpson, which was also an FX show, which I thought was great. And they came and they said, listen, we don't just want you to give us the book and we go off and make a TV show. We want you to actually come along and be a producer and be involved day to day making the show. And for me, that was an opportunity. First of all, it was like going to film school, right? I got to learn how all of this stuff works. But then second, to be there kind of as a custodian for my book, to just make sure that we got it right. And it took 5 years. It was a 9-month shoot. It was a huge amount of work to try and get it right, but I am amazingly pleased with the results. I think it's It's come out so well, and I'm proud of it, and I'm excited for people to watch it.
You're American but of Irish descent, understand, but you made sure to pick people who understand the Irish and Ireland itself. So that was very important, including right down to any kind of little details that might be a part of life back then in the 70s.
That's exactly right. I mean, I think sometimes it's good to be an outsider when you tell a story because it gives you a different perspective. But I also think you have to get it right. And so it was important for me that listen, I won't mention any names, but there have been some bad movies made about the IRA with like American movie stars doing bad Irish accents. And that was what I knew we didn't want. And so we had to get it right. So we have a great cast. It's mostly an Irish cast, a lot of fresh faces, people who I think are really stars in the making. And then one of our main directors is a guy, Mike Lennox. And Mike Lennox directed every episode of Derry Girls. He's actually from Belfast himself.
That's a great show.
It is a great show. But what I loved about that show is it's very, you feel like you're really watching the real thing. People from Northern Ireland feel like it represents them well. So that was the goal for us, was to try and get it to be that accurate. So it's approachable, it's accessible, people in the US can watch it and I hope get drawn into the story. But I also wanted people from the place it's from to be able to watch it and say, yeah, they got it right.
Did you talk to any family members of, say, the disappeared or the Price family, relatives of them, to find out how they felt, first of all, about the novel and maybe how they're going to feel about this, because it's their personal lives right out there?
It is. So we did, particularly with the families of the victims, we did a lot of outreach as we were working on the series. You can imagine, I mean, these are incredibly traumatic events for these people who've grown up with the shadow of this. And if you're, doing a drama about such a dark period of time, it's going to be hard for them. But what we did was a lot of outreach. I actually went with that guy, Michael Lennox, and made a number of trips to Belfast to sit with the families of victims and say, what are your concerns? Let us tell you about what we're doing. Let us explain what we're doing here, just so that we could sort of have that dialogue. So that was very important for us to do along the way.
And I appreciated that you focused on these strong women and also the family where they came from. And because the Price sisters' family was kind of incredible themselves. Both parents had been to jail at one point.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, this was part of what was intriguing to me about these sisters when I first started learning about them, a decade ago, was that when they were little girls, where you or I might have had bedtime stories from our mom, when they were little girls, their dad would tell them how to make improvised explosives. Like, those were the stories he was telling them. So they grew up, in a way, kind of radicalized in their own house. Yeah,
and they had a sister who had lost both her hands and her eyes in an explosion where she mishandled a bomb as well.
That's right. So this is part of, I think, when you look at any of these conflicts, and this is true in Northern Ireland, but it's true in other parts of the world as well, part of what keeps the thing going, part of what makes the conflict keep dragging on, is that people start to think, I'm not just doing this for me or for the politics of it. I need to avenge what happened to this person who came before me. It's almost a story of sort of trying to make good on the sacrifices of the people who came before.
Absolutely. We want to tell our audience, Say Nothing is streaming now on Hulu. Patrick, thank you so much, and excellent, excellent work.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
You bet. We'll be right back with more AM Northwest. Don't go away.